Today, a cough sends you to WebMD. In the Middle Ages, it sent you to the barber with a knife. Medieval healthcare was less board certified and more hold still while I get the leeches. Here are some of the medieval medical procedures that are much worse than you think. Trepanation. We all get headaches. Maybe you stared at a spreadsheet for 9 hours. Maybe you tried to understand the timeline of the Fast and Furious franchise. When this happens to us modern, pampered weaklings, we pop 2 Advil, drink a glass of water, and lie down in a dark room until the world stops spinning. But in the Middle Ages, no. Lying down in a dark room was for the weak and peasants who couldn't afford a doctor. If you had the coin and a persistent migraine, epilepsy, or just a general case of acting a little weird, the local barber surgeon had a groundbreaking, mind-opening solution for you. Literally. Enter trepanation, the medical art of taking what is essentially a literal carpenter's tool and boring a permanent sunroof into your skull. You see, medical science back then was less peer-reviewed research and more vibes and superstition. The prevailing theory was that your headache wasn't caused by dehydration or stress. Obviously, your skull was overpressurized with bad blood, or worse, demons. The only logical solution was to install a speed hole so the evil spirits could vent out like exhaust from a Honda Civic. They used an instrument called a trephine. It's basically a heavy-duty hole saw. And remember, anesthesia hasn't been invented yet. Neither has the concept of washing your hands. So your surgeon would literally pin you down and start cranking this jagged metal apple core directly into your cranium. It's like if Bob the Builder went on a true crime bender. Can we fix it? No, but we can definitely expose your brain to the open, plague-filled air. The doctor would literally scrape and grind away until he popped out a neat little disc of your skull, exposing the dura mater, the protective membrane of your brain. And the craziest part, the absolute most unhinged, baffling part of this entire nightmare, a lot of people survived. Mercury treatments. If there's one thing human beings have never lost across the centuries, it's our absolute, unwavering desperation for a miracle cure. Today, if your favorite podcaster tells you that drinking a pulverized blend of elk antlers and rare Himalayan moss will make you live to be 120, you'll drop $80 a month on a subscription without blinking. But back in the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, they didn't have discount codes for athletic greens. What they did have was a shiny, mesmerizing, and incredibly toxic metal. I am, of course, talking about mercury, or as the medieval hipsters called it, quicksilver. Today, if you spill a drop of mercury on the floor, the EPA treats your house like the crash site of an alien spacecraft. But back in the day, doctors looked at this liquid and thought, you know what? I bet this would make a fantastic skin cream. Mercury was the medical equivalent of duct tape. It fixes everything. Got a weird rash? Slap some mercury on it. Feeling a little melancholic? Drink a Quicksilver smoothie. But mercury really hit its stride as a medical superstar when Europe experienced a massive outbreak of syphilis, or as it was affectionately known at the time, the Great Pox. Let's say you were a 15th century mercenary who got a little too friendly with someone at the local tavern, and a few weeks later you realize your skin's starting to look like a pepperoni pizza that was left in the sun. You go to your local plague doctor and he gives you the ultimate bad news/worse news diagnosis. The treatment? The wildly popular catchphrase of the era. A night with Venus, a lifetime with Mercury. Which honestly sounds like a rejected lyric from a Freddie Mercury solo album, but was actually a terrifying medical reality. The doctors would prescribe mercury in a few fun, exciting ways. Sometimes they'd mix it with pig fat and aggressively rub it all over your sores. But if the ointment didn't work, oh buddy, it was time to hit the sauna. Enter the fumigation process. They would lock you in a tiny heated wooden cabinet, basically an easy bake oven for human suffering, and throw mercury onto hot coals. The metal would vaporize and you'd sit there, marinating in a cloud of highly toxic heavy metal smoke. You were literally inhaling the T-1000 from Terminator 2. Now you might be asking, didn't the doctors notice that this was poisoning their patients? Oh, they noticed the effects. They just wildly misinterpreted them. You see, one of the main symptoms of severe mercury poisoning is excessive, uncontrollable salivation. We're talking drooling literal pints of spit a day. They believe the excessive drooling was simply the venom of the syphilis leaving the body. Sure, the patient was also experiencing severe muscle tremors, dementia, and their gums were rotting so fast their teeth were falling out like loose Tic Tacs. But hey, at least the rash is gone. The four humors balancing. Say hello to the four humors. For roughly 2,000 years, the brightest medical minds on the planet firmly believed that the human body was basically just a fleshy meat sack filled with four magical liquids: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. According to Hippocrates and Galen, every single disease, mood swing, or minor inconvenience you experienced was because your fluids were out of whack. Feeling angry? You've got too much yellow bile, my guy. Feeling sad? That's the black bile acting up. Got a fever? Oh, buddy, you are absolutely drowning in blood. To the medical physician, you were an HVAC system that needed its filters changed, and the only way to cure you was to restore the balance. Let's start with the VIP of the humors, blood. The medical doctor's absolute favorite pastime was bloodletting. Today, we try to keep our blood inside our bodies. We're selfish like that. But back then, doctors treated blood like an unwanted house guest that had overstayed their welcome. Got a cold? Let it bleed. Gout? Cut open a vein. Just got stabbed by an English longbowman at the Battle of Agincourt? You better start bleeding just to be safe. They would use a tiny, horrifically unsterile blade called a phleem to slice open a vein in your arm or neck, and just let you bleed into a bowl until you passed out, which, by the way, the doctors considered a sign of success. But let's say slicing your own veins open wasn't really your aesthetic. Good news, the doctor brought his pets. Enter the leech. But wait, what if your blood wasn't the problem? I need you to emotionally prepare yourself for this next part. Because if they wanted to balance your other humors, they had to induce purging. We're talking about emetics that make you violently vomit and laxatives that make you, well, shit like hell. And if the oral laxatives don't work, they brought out the clyster. The clyster was a medical enema, but instead of a discreet little plastic bottle you buy at Walgreens in the dead of night while avoiding eye contact with the cashier, the medieval clyster was a massive, terrifying brass syringe. The doctor would fill this nightmarish bazooka with a concoction of warm water, salt, baking soda, and sometimes, if they were feeling spicy, boar's bile or literal tobacco smoke. Then they would just blast it up your tailpipe. It's a miracle the human race survived the 14th century. Honestly, we didn't beat disease with science back then. We just annoyed our bodies so aggressively with leeches, knives, and brass syringes that our immune systems finally went, "Fine, I'll get better. Just keep that guy away from my rectum." Cauterization. Now, let's say you were a peasant who took a sword to the shoulder, or worse, you got a paper cut from a really aggressive piece of parchment. Today, you'd get some Neosporin and a Paw Patrol Band-Aid, but in the 14th century, your physician looked at your gaping flesh and thought, you know what this needs? To be cooked. You see, before the pesky invention of germ theory, doctors believed that the best way to stop bleeding and prevent infection was to literally set your open wounds on fire. You had two main options on the medieval menu, and both of them sucked. Option A was a red-hot iron poker, straight from the blacksmith's forge, pressed lovingly into your exposed nerve endings. You'd leave the medical tent looking like Anakin Skywalker dragging his crispy torso out of the lava on Mustafar. But hey, at least you weren't bleeding anymore. You were just in shock, traumatized, and smelling like a backyard barbecue where the secret ingredient was you. Then there was option B, boiling oil. Because why just burn the surface when you can deep fry the patient? Physicians would literally pour scalding hot oil directly into the wound to draw out the poison. It was the ultimate medieval skincare routine. The logic was that fire purifies. They genuinely believed this balanced your humors because clearly the best way to fix a phlegm imbalance is to melt the guy's epidermis off. You'd bite down on a leather strap, pray to whichever saint was in charge of not spontaneously combusting, and just take it. And the survival rate? Let's just say the Grim Reaper didn't have to work for it back then. He was basically on paid PTO for the entire 14th century. Tooth extraction. So, you've miraculously survived the human barbecue that was our previous segment on cauterization. Congratulations! You're now medium rare, heavily traumatized, and probably smelling like the aftermath of a gender reveal party gone wrong. So, what happens when you wake up the next morning with a little throbbing headache? Brace yourselves, kids, because we're getting to the root of the problem. That's right, it's time to talk about medieval tooth extraction. So, truth be told, you didn't just call up a sterile clinic and complain about a cavity back then. dentist didn't exist. Instead, you went to the local barber surgeon. Yes, the same guy who lances your boils and occasionally amputates a leg if the mood strikes. Now, today you complain if the hygienist makes too much small talk while your mouth is full of metal. In the Middle Ages, you were just praying the barber washed the horse manure off his hands. And the anesthesia? It wasn't a thing. To pull your rotting teeth, the barber would whip out a medieval torture device affectionately called the dental pelican. Here's the completely unhinged procedure. The barber would hook the claw of the pelican over the top of your mouth, brace the metal fulcrum against your gums, yes, directly on your soft squishy gums, and then forcefully twist his wrist. So, you've got a massive gaping wound in your mouth, 0 antibiotics, and your doctor just went back to giving the town blacksmith a bowl cut. The infection rate was astronomical. People literally died from toothaches, which frankly sounds like a pretty embarrassing way to enter the afterlife. Oh, you died in glorious battle. Cool. A popcorn kernel got stuck in my molar and my brain swelled up. But hey, at least you didn't have to pay a copay. The trotula treatment. Saving the dumbest of them all for last, if surviving a red-hot iron to an open wound and getting your molars yanked out by a medieval barber who also just gave you a fade wasn't enough to make you appreciate modern medicine, buckle up. Because for our final descent into historical malpractice, we're talking about women's healthcare. Specifically, a little medical compendium known as the Trotula. The Trotula was an influential collection of texts from Salerno, Italy, dedicated entirely to women's medicine, cosmetics, and gynecology. Let's start with the absolute pinnacle of anatomical logic, the wandering womb. Doctors back then firmly believed the uterus was essentially a biological Roomba. They thought it could unhinge itself and take a casual stroll around your internal organs whenever it felt neglected. Uterus in your lungs? Sure. Uterus chilling near your liver? Why not? One does not simply walk into Mordor, but apparently, your reproductive organs could map out the Dora the Explorer route right up to your trachea. So how did the Trotula suggest you treat a womb with a view? Aromatherapy, obviously, because the uterus was treated like a feral animal. Doctors believed it would flee from bad smells and be drawn to good ones. If your womb crept up too high, the physician would hold burning hair or sulfur under your nose, while rubbing sweet-smelling oils near your nether regions to coax it back down. But the Trotula was also the ultimate medieval beauty vlog. 11th century Sephora recommended a foundation made of pure, unadulterated lead. Need to get rid of unwanted body hair? Forget waxing. The Trotula suggested a depilatory cream of quicklime and arsenic. It didn't just remove the hair, it removed the top layer of your skin and you're well to live. For contraception, the Trotula had you covered with the foolproof method of wearing weasel testicles around your neck. It was supposed to ward off pregnancy, and honestly, it probably worked flawlessly as medieval birth control. So next time you're in a sterile doctor's office complaining about 2019 magazines, remember, you could be rubbing quicklime on your legs while inhaling burnt hair.